Please pray with me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts draw us closer to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. This familiar section of the Beatitudes from Matthew might seem to be an odd choice for Die de Los Muertos. And if you're a person who follows the lectionary, you've noticed I've veered off into Matthew when year C we're usually in Luke. But I like to put these two things together because I think that the process of growing up and the process of grief are kind of the same thing. Our spiritual growth, in many of the same ways that we go through the stages of grief, is how we grow up. Now, for those of you who are fans of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, you know some of the stages of grief, and I'm not going to list them quote in order because it's been my experience that you do them in what order you do them in. I've even known people who started at acceptance that went backwards and found their anger, and then they went backwards and they started bargaining, and then they went backwards and they said they went into their shock, they went into their sadness, all the different things. Sometimes you say, and especially like if someone's been ill a long time, you might actually start at acceptance, especially if someone's had Alzheimer's, for example, for a really long time. You accept their death, and then a few weeks later, you figure out, why am I angry at everyone? Why am I just ready to jump out of my skin? That's because we don't do these things in order. So that's one way to think about the process of both spiritual growth and grief. They're having a party in there. And grief is often one of the greatest opportunities for spiritual growth. How we handle loss, how we handle soul-splitting loss usually changes us in deep ways. And as some of the stories came out from the ofrenda, sometimes it might take many years for that change to show up. Many years from us to move from resentment to forgiveness. Many years for us to get past some of the wounds. Many years to really appreciate the ways that someone has formed us. So one of the things I put on here is a sculpture. I think I've brought this before, but I wanted to put it on camera today. And this is another reason that I moved to Matthew today. Because some of you may, if you can see it from there, you may recognize a bit of Matthew 25. When I was hungry, when I was in prison, when I was thirsty. And you'll see the prison, there's even a shackle there, and the closed fist. My childhood pastor, Reverend John Odie, was also a sculptor, and he made this as part of Matthew 25. He also sculpted, and sadly I don't have this anymore, he sculpted my father playing Charlie Brown. And I wish I had that still, because it was a great sculpture of my father dressed as Charlie Brown. which was one of his best roles because my father desperately, desperately wanted to be able to sing and be in musicals. He loved music, and he was, largely because he had some hearing problems, he really could not sing. So the only role he could ever play in a musical was Charlie Brown. And a Charlie Brown that basically spoke the role and really couldn't sing was actually made Charlie Brown so much more pathetic that he was great as Charlie Brown. But I think of this, and this sits on my desk, because John Odie in many ways is responsible for my being able to grieve the loss of my great-grandparents, which was a very hard loss for me as a child, a very, very hard loss. And also, every day in ministry, I think about Matthew 25 and John. Because early on, I was trained that, what you do to the least of these is what you do to me. If you love Jesus, this is what you're doing. This is it right here. But why the Beatitudes? I could have picked something else from Matthew, right? Why the Beatitudes? And of course, people have written whole books and long sermon series on the Beatitudes. And it's often said that, are you a Beatitudes kind of preacher or what, right? There's, the Beatitudes are foundational for a lot of folks. In this context, we almost never really read the Beatitudes in their full context. They are both preceded and followed by a bunch of woes. Woe to, and it's often the opposite of what the blessings are. So there's this idea in Matthew, which later gets carried out into some Protestant theology, as some are blessed and others deserve woes. Now, that led to, of course, some bad theology, which we've been talking about in our Stephen Prothero book. We've been talking about double predestination, where some are damned to hell and some are damned to heaven, or damned if you do, damned if you don't, from the time you're born. So it's like, what's the point of anything, right? So we've been talking about that a little bit, but it comes from this, the idea that, blessings and woes are opposites. But of course, we all know that actually you can be both woe and blessing simultaneously. That most of us are complex like that. We are both blessed and we have our foibles. We have our challenges. We have those things we're not proud of. And so for me, the process of grief, while it may have all those stages that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has described, it's really a process of moving from woe to blessing. When someone dies, we often start in woe. Woe to me. Woe to the world, this person is gone. Woe. And we don't use woe very often. It's kind of archaic language now. But to be woeful is to mourn, is to genuinely feel the loss. And it's important to do that. When my father died somewhat suddenly in 1999, I was very busy with a lot of other things, and I didn't really mourn him properly. I really didn't. He died sort of suddenly. It was in Texas. I had a whole life in San Francisco. I was busy. I was doing things, and I was sad, and when I would go back to Texas, I was sad, but I didn't really mourn him properly. And so about a year and a half after he died, I found myself very depressed. That unmourned loss became toxic to me, literally toxic to me. And I remember the therapist at the time, a good Jungian therapist, said, you can feel it now or feel it later, but it's better the earlier you feel it. The longer you put it off, the worse it gets. Because it can move into illness, usually starting with our mental wellness, but it can literally move into your body. So mourning is really important, feeling the woes, being willing to confront the loss. And in my own experience, the sooner that we do that, the quicker we can move to the blessings. We can move to a sense of gratitude for that person and what they bring, Lord have mercy, what they brought to our life, and how they live on in us, especially when someone really, really matters. You notice the ways that they may live on in you. And some of those things are maybe a little disturbing. I mean, I have the valiant turkey neck. And it is absolutely, if I brought a bunch of valiant pictures, we all have it. I mean, I have a preview of coming attractions. And it's a little woeful. I try to just accept that that's what it is, and it's clearly genetic. It's nothing I've ever done, right? It's coming, whether I want it or not. But I also find every once in a while that I will say something in a particular way or make a particular gesture, and I know that that gesture came from my father. And I remember how funny he was and how much fun he was. And I no longer have to keep mourning. I can actually just, he lives in me, the best parts of him. The best parts of him live in me. So my invitation to you is to move from woe to blessing. And you might even use the Beatitudes as a guide of what kind of blessing. As you mourn those or think about those you've lost, were they peacemakers? Were they meek? Were they mild? What gifts did they leave in you? What blessings live on in you? And of course, we're blessed to be a blessing. So when we count the blessings we have received, that also gives us a little hint of what our role is in the world. Because however you've been blessed is however you're going to be able to serve. Those are the blessings you can give to others, because you have them. And try, as Bonnie said, hurt people, and blessed people. So try to pass on your blessings, not your woes. We all have them, but we don't have to hand them to others on a silver platter. Instead, let us be people of blessing. May it be so. Amen.